Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled The Year Northwestern Changed College Football Without Anyone Noticing. What if, in 2010, Northwestern made a coaching hire that didn't look dangerous? No scandal, no splashy headlines, no five-star race. But 15 years later, that single decision quietly reshaped how conferences think about power, markets, and leverage. And it played a direct role in Notre Dame seriously flirting with the SEC. Not because Northwestern became dominant, but because they became useful. This is the story of the most important realignment ripple you probably never noticed. Now let's set the table on the alternate universe hire that shouldn't have mattered. In this parallel universe, Northwestern hires Chris Peterson in 2010. At the time, it feels fine. Smart coach, clean reputation, system guy, player development. The assumption around the sport is simple. He'll do well there, but there's still a ceiling. That assumption turns out to be wrong, but not in the way people expect. Northwestern doesn't turn into a juggernaut. They don't chase five stars. They don't dominate the Big Ten. Instead, they become predictable. 8 wins, 9 wins, occasionally 10, rarely embarrassing. And that predictability is what changes everything. Because for the first time, Northwestern's not a novelty, they're proof of concept. And that sets the table for the conference that panics first. The first conference to notice something is wrong isn't the Big Ten, it's the Pac-10. Not because they're scared by Northwestern, but because they are afraid of the philosophical ramifications. For years, the Pac-10 believed it owned a specific lane: elite academics, national recruiting, moral superiority over football-first conferences. Then Northwestern shows up and quietly says, you can do this in the Midwest. The first leak doesn't come from an AD, it comes from Stanford, not publicly, not loudly. Just a quiet question floating through academic and media circles. What happens if Northwestern becomes the national model for smart football? That question scares the Pac-10 more than expansion ever could. And this sets the table for the moment Northwestern realizes it has leverage. Northwestern doesn't realize it during a win. They realize it during a phone call. Late in the 2010 season, three things happened within 3 days. Big Ten Network data shows Northwestern games drawing sustainable Chicago ratings, not novelty spikes. Two Midwest recruits decommit elsewhere, citing development clarity. A Big Ten president, not Northwestern's, asked quietly, if you ever needed institutional support, we'd want to know early. That's the moment. Northwestern doesn't have to make noise about leaving. They don't posture. They don't leak. They realize something far more valuable. They don't need to ask. And that sets the stage for the Big Ten's strategic pause. The Big Ten believes it has solved its problems. Chicago market, check. Academic prestige, check. Media stability, check. So instead of expanding aggressively, the Big Ten chooses restraint. No rush, no panic, no defensive moves. Internally, leadership says, we don't expand to survive, we expand to refine. And for a few years, that works. Northwestern wins 9 to 10 games. Wisconsin quietly benefits. The conference looks clean, stable, adult. But something subtle breaks, and that sets the stage for the school that gets nervous. And that school is Michigan, not because Northwestern beats them consistently, but because Northwestern proves something very uncomfortable. You don't need mythology to matter. Recruiting pitches start overlapping. Media language adjusts. Northwestern is discussed as a peer, not a curiosity. In 2014, a donor-adjacent comment leaks quietly into a business journal. The conference is drifting toward parity in places it shouldn't. That sentence is not about wins, it's about status. And that sets the table for the media clause that changes everything. During Big Ten media renegotiations, a new clause slips in. It's not flashy, it's not framed as optimization, guaranteed Tier 1 Chicago exposure. What this really means is Northwestern is structurally visible every year. The Chicago market is now owned, not borrowed, and the Big Ten no longer needs expansion to justify value. This is where the math changes. Chicago is closed, and when a market closes internally, expansion urgency disappears. And this sets the table for when restraint backfires. By 2017, the SEC reframes the game. Expansion is not about geography anymore, it's about playoff gravity. The Big Ten looks stable, but slow. They optimize for markets. They underweighted postseason leverage. This is the cost of restraint. They're safe, but no longer inevitable. And that sets the table for Notre Dame running the numbers. Notre Dame notices something very unsettling. The Big Ten no longer needs them. Chicago is locked. Academic prestige is internal. Media partners aren't begging. For the first time, Notre Dame leverage narrows. In 2019, they quietly entertain an SEC retreat. Not a negotiation, not a commitment, a question. What does alignment buy us now? In 2023, a misattributed quote leaks. Notre Dame understands what alignment buys you. Notre Dame does not deny this. Silence confirms it. And that sets the table for the Big Ten's final push. The Big Ten responds with its best offer: autonomy, branded windows, cultural fit, tradition. It's thoughtful, it's respectful, and it absolutely fails. Because the pitch is about comfort, the SEC pitch is about gravity. You belong here versus you'll never be excluded here. In a playoff driven sport, that difference matters. And what Northwestern really did in this alternate universe, Northwestern never demanded power, they normalized competence. And by doing that, they locked Chicago, reshaped expansion math, narrowed Notre Dame's leverage, forced conferences to negotiate with themselves. They didn't win championships. They didn't break the sport. They made it inevitable. And if you enjoy these quiet chaos timelines, the ones where a single decision bends history quietly, like the video, subscribe, and tell me which school you want to drop into next. Because the most dangerous moves in college football are the ones that look harmless at the time.